Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sending the Wolf. I see you in the chat, Jeremy, saying, I'm looking forward to this. I am looking forward to this too. In fact, the reason that I am 1 minute late is because I was just chatting. I was just chatting with our guest, and I told him up front, I was like, this is why I need a producer. And I waited till the last minute to check his mic, to work with him on his mic. But he sounds great. Sounds great. Looks great. This is going to be great. My name is Clarke Wolfe. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm so excited to welcome my guest. Let's just get right into it. What do we need? Any sort of preamble? He is a writer. He's a producer. He's a director. And he directed me in a movie also, which it feels like I've known him and his wife longer, but I haven't. So let's get into it. Please welcome Anthony DiBlasi. There he is.
Hi.
Hi.
You got me paranoid about my mic and my voice. Listen,
you sound great.
Anytime you're like, this doesn't sound right, you pause the show.
We stop down.
Mic. Yeah. I got my giant cans on.
I see. I got mine on too.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, that's the thing about live, is that it's live. We'll do it live.
Who knows what I'll say?
Who can imagine?
Who knows what stories I'll tell about you on set?
What yarn? Oh,
what yarns will
you spin?
What yarns?
How you doing, Anthony?
I'm good. How are you doing? I like all the pink you got going on. I like the colors.
This is the vibe. Is the vibe. Like the vibe is Beverly Hills Hotel. That was what this and that. You know,
perfect. It's perfect.
It's an interesting thing being a lady in the movie talk space, because like on the one hand, I don't ever want to shy away from the fact that I am a girl and femme in a lot of ways, but also there's part of it where I'm like, yeah, but I can't ever have it be too girly, because we're talking about superheroes and horror movies. Like, well, we gotta. So I figured Beverly Hills Hotel felt like Hollywood, but also, kind of girly.
Girly.
This is where I'm at.
Modern
with the branding.
Girly. Yeah. Touch of bubble gum. I like it.
Yeah. Very LA, Hollywood.
Very LA.
Yes, Speaking of LA, you are not in Los Angeles currently.
Not at the moment. I am in Phoenix, Arizona. And mind you, unfortunately, it's 85 degrees today and it's February, and that's a problem.
It's not great. It's not great for similarly in Los Angeles. I am currently in Los Angeles, and because I do spend a lot of time in Atlanta, but I'm mostly in LA now. And we were up in the 80s today too. In February. Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Okay, so that's like an anomalous. Yeah. Okay, so it's just a heat wave coming through, but that doesn't bode well for the summer.
No. That's what I had that exact same conversation. My friend was like, oh man, it's freezing in Atlanta. I wish it was. And I was like, girl, you know what this summer is going to look like?
Yeah.
Like, no.
You don't want it. Keep your winter.
As long as we can. So you and Nat are in Arizona, and I think that's a question that I'd love to kind of kick it off, because I'm sure chat will appreciate that. We have people and viewers, from all over the world in various states or interests with the entertainment industry. Can you talk a little bit about like your decision to not be primarily based in Los Angeles, because you do still have a residence here?
Yeah, and my wife has an office. Natalie has an office in Redondo, so we go back and forth a lot. I mean, I was in LA for 20 years, from Boston originally, and I was just like, we just wanted a change. I think a break from the traffic and the congestion and the helicopters and LA wasn't the LA I moved to back in 2002. So that, and then we were coming to Scottsdale a lot over like COVID, and just liked it. It's like it's a resort town. There's like a 200 resorts here, and it's just, I kind of feel like I'm on vacation. So when I'm writing and stuff and editing, it's just kind of more peaceful to be here. But it's so easy, flying back is like an hour, it's an hour. It's super, and the airport's like 5 minutes from us. It's a really quick commute.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah, I have to imagine. I love Arizona. I haven't spent a ton of time there, but when I did, I sort of it was. I don't know if I've ever told you. I think I have that I went on tour with you too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so one of our stops was Glendale, Arizona,
yeah,
and as a result, you know, you two, the way their tour schedule is like they do like 2 shows a week,
yeah,
maybe 3.
yeah,
Maybe. And so, but as a result, we got to go to all these stops and just kind of set up camp. And so of course they put us up at this gorgeous hotel in Arizona, in Glendale, Arizona. And I was like, Arizona's great.
You're like, I love it here.
This is great. So yeah, all the time that I spent, and you know, I love the desert.
Yeah.
I'm a big Palm Springs person. Like
Okay.
if I could kind of have what you have, Palm Springs in LA, that I mean, that's such a bratty LA thing to say. Oh, if I could just avoid having to drive 90 minutes, like
Yeah, I
that
know,
would be
right?
great for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan, but I feel the same way when I'm writing. I have to, or working and thinking, I have to be in a space that is not my home. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm usually in my home office, but
Well, yes, and
yeah.
I suppose that yes, that makes more sense. I guess out of the element, or like away
Yeah.
from kind of the distraction.
The distraction. Yeah. But no, I mean, yeah. I mean, anyone who's like, I get it. Everyone who's in different states and stuff, and either they're in the business or wanting to be in the business. The downside about being, and again, it's when you're not in the mix in LA, it's hard to just like, oh, let me go meet you guys at last minute stuff. It's easy if, it's like, oh, I could go tomorrow. I could be
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. Like, Clarke, you want to hang out? I can be there tomorrow.
right.
But same day stuff, that's tough, right? That's where you're missing out on that kind of last minute stuff.
That's where you need the private plane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I could
Um,
drive.
so I already have a great question in the chat from Gishgali. Is that a Sleestack portrait,
It
Anthony?
is. It's a black velvet Sleestack portrait from Mexico. It's one of my prized possessions.
It's awesome. It's great. It's absolutely great. And I think I see a predator in the background too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there he is. Life size, right?
I'm always 1/3 scale for the nerds out
Okay.
there.
Okay, good.
No, he's
Which
closer to
we
half
are.
scale. Yeah.
Okay. Brian, so we also have a comment from Ed, a huge supporter of both of your crafts of art. Thanks, Ed. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. So, all right, let's tell, and Gishkali says amazing about Sleestack. So let's tell the chat. You and I met because you cast me in your movie Malum, which was a reimagining of The Last Shift. And I have to say one of the reasons I had a great time on that set, but one of the reasons that I am so proud of, that experience and that part is because you and I didn't really know each other before that process. And I reached out to our mutual friend Buzz Wallach and said like, "Hey, will you tell Anthony, like tell them to see me for this?"
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about I guess I want to start by talking about reimagining The Last Shift, which I know you've
Okay.
talked a lot about, but I think that could be a fun way in, and then sort of like, the difference. I just think let's start with The Last Shift and reimagining it. The guys at Welcome Villain approach you and they say, "Hey, would you ever want to do that again?" Like, how did that conversation go?
Yeah, it was that I didn't. So Luc LeBeau was starting Welcome Villain with his team, and Luke was primarily in marketing. Came from Orion Pictures, and then he was at Blumhouse before that. And I didn't know Luke personally. My friend Micheline Pitt knew Luke, and she was like, "Hey, I have a buddy who wants to meet you." So she connected us. I was at a pumpkin patch when we had a conversation.
Oh my God, how appropriate.
Jumped on a call with him, and he brought up Last Shift and said, well, what do you think about kind of revisiting that world again? And that was the start of the conversation. And it, more, and then my writing partner, Scott, we talked about like, hey, I think these guys would be interested in doing something in this world. And we owned the rights, Scott and I, so it wasn't like tangled up with Magnolia. And I honestly don't remember when it turned into, why don't we reboot it?
Yeah.
Because I know we tossed around maybe doing a sequel for a while. I know like Scott was keen on doing a prequel. I don't love prequels, and it wasn't really, I like progressing a story. So that was it. We settled with the guys. And I know that for me, like Last Shift was one of those movies that it got, Magnolia picked it up, and that was where we wanted it to land. We always felt that Last Shift could have done some theatrical business, and they didn't do any theatrical release for it. It was put out on digital and Blu-ray and stuff, and then it quickly went to Netflix. I don't know, it feels quickly, but it might have been like a year later.
Yeah.
And Netflix is like really where it found a big audience, and over time, and even now continues to find an audience. I think Last Shift was one of those movies that was like, people could see it, like, oh, this movie really works. Let me ask my friends if they've seen it, and they hadn't seen it. So you can like kind of share it that way. And I think kind of like when we were younger, you had a movie that you really liked that not all your friends saw.
Yeah.
So it still has legs like that. So the main reason to reboot it really was to give it to a new audience, was to attract an entirely different audience with a version of the same material. In my eyes, it's not similar at all. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, it's the same thing, but I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that way when we were writing it. I feel like it's a different kind of movie, and you'll have, and if someone asks me which one is better, I don't know if I can really answer that question, because they're
so different.
Yeah, they're for different audiences. That you're going to get a different experience. But yes, you, right? It's funny to say I met you on Malum, because I mean we'd run in the same circles for forever before that, years and years and years, and I'm sure I saw you at parties and things like that. But yeah, I guess we never really talked.
No, I mean, there was a moment where you were on Twitter, right? Like a million years ago.
Yeah.
And the reason I remember that is because I was doing the Bloodcast with Ryan Turek, and the Last Shift came up, and I think that is why I followed you on Twitter. And then I think I remember that we didn't really interact. I just remember I was like, I followed Anthony on Twitter.
Yeah.
I know that I did. But we were not buddies. And I've been really in the horror space, especially like, if you have a friend making a movie, they'll say, oh, do you want to audition, or, oh, you want to play this small part or whatever. And so Malum was so cool for me for a lot of reasons, but especially as a horror fan too, because I had seen The Last Shift and I knew how much fans, loved The Last Shift. And I know Josh Michael, he's a big Atlanta guy. And he of course plays John in the, his name's John and
Payman. Yeah. John Michael Payman.
Exactly. And of course, chat, for those of you who don't know, Payman is, in Hereditary, the god and
that's why we changed, right? That's why we changed it. Yeah.
That's
we did it first.
You did do it first. I'm sure Ari is a Last Shift fan. But I was so proud because I had a friend reach out and be like, I've worked with Clarke and you should see her or whatever. Yeah. But I didn't get that role because we were friends. And that is one of the things where, because it's just like, you're firing things off into the void. And so sometimes Anthony, as an actor, and I'm sure Natalie has talked about this, but sometimes you put something on tape and you're like, yeah, I feel really good about that. And Malum was one of those times where I put myself on tape and I was like, I feel really good about that. But other other times, nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, when you have that feeling, you never hear another thing, and it's like that's it, game over. Like you move on.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
for
was
actors,
another one.
that for actors especially, you don't even know if anyone's watching it, right? You're like, did anyone even see it? You may feel like this. It may be the best thing that they got, but you question like, well, how do I know they even watched it half the time? Because this tape, video and sending links and casting directors, it's like you really don't know. You just don't know. Oh, I never opened that. Yeah, we never watched that. Oh, she had red hair, so I didn't even bother.
I mean, yes. I just auditioned for something where I was auditioning to play a real person, and I even kind of looked like this woman. And they were like,
Manson girl.
Yes, absolutely, yes, for sure. Very on brand. And but yeah, and they were like, there was something that I really wanted, and I know the casting directors, so I was like, okay, they would not bring me in on this if they didn't think I could really do it.
Yeah.
And I said, so will you follow up? And they were like, oh yeah, we want a different look. And I was just like, but
I look like her.
But I look like her. Yeah, exactly. And I just was like, can I retape? Can I change? Also, you know what my face looks like. Why did you bring me in then if you didn't?
They're like, anyway. we don't like what the real person looks like. Therefore, we don't like what Clarke looks like.
Yeah, that's got to be it. That's got to be it, clearly. But yeah, so that was such a really, really like proud moment for me. And I loved, a story that I'll tell. And I see Gishgali and Adam, hi Adam, have follow-up questions about the two Last Shift and Malum that I'll pose to you in a second. But one story that I remember from the callback is it was the baseball bat scene. And so I did it kind of like, I did in the audition. And then I remember your direction was now do it like it's your sister that you are, right? And do you remember what I said?
No. In the moment? The delivery of what you said to me? No. What'd you say?
I said, do I like my sister?
Oh, yeah. Good. I was like, that's a good question. Yeah.
And Anthony was like, and you were like, I'm gonna let you decide.
Which is usually what I'll say. I'll let you decide that.
Yeah.
But that's a good question to ask. That was a great question to ask in the moment. And no, I mean, yes, like both you were, because I knew you through social media and knew you in space as a host.
Right.
In that space. And I don't think I knew you were like acting. And I honestly think I think I saw your tape before Buzz even reached out to me. Or like I think I'd seen it and immediately liked it right away. So it wasn't like I didn't need Buzz to kind of like nudge me on that because I do. Also, I'm very methodical about like watching everything that comes through casting. Sometimes casting directors kind of bump at that, but if it's if they have a lot of work on their plate, it's easier for them. I'm like, just send me everything. I'll look at everything, even if you think they suck, just send them my way.
Yeah.
So I definitely saw it, and loved that the take you did, and I was like, oh, like Clarke's got like chops, and then in the audition, and always when I'm auditioning people in person or on tape, you're already there because you're like in the top choices, and I just want to see if someone can take direction, right? So I'll usually give just a very simple and something that will turn it on its head. That's why I like do it as if she's your sister. That will usually flip it in a way that's, because for a role like yours, right? People are coming in. I'm crazy. I'm aggressive. I'm here to kill people. And then I'm like, well, do it as if it's your sister. Then it changes that.
Right. And I think too that in that moment, kind of having seen The Last Shift, sure. And I didn't rewatch it before, like directly before the callback, but knowing this type of movie, I felt like it was an advantage to be a horror fan in a way, because I was like, okay, I know what part Kitty is, right?
Yeah.
and then I know what part Dorothea is. And so I think that was I think it was just such a testament to yours and Scott's script, was like, okay, I can see who these characters are, like from the dial immediately on the page,
Good. Yeah. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's get to chat. Chat had some great questions. So Gishgali had a follow-up. Can you explain the differences between the two audiences for Malum and The Last Shift? So you said, like, making Malum is really like an opportunity to make it for a different audience. So can you go in a little more in depth in that?
Well, two-tier answer. First answer is just scope of marketing and hitting an audience outside of the genre space, right? A lot of times in horror, you're marketing to, Dread Central and Bloody Disgusting, and you're hitting your core fan base, and that's good. You want to do that, and that's kind of what Last Shift did. Now, when it hit Netflix, it transcended that, because you have just people turning on their TVs and like, oh, that poster looks cool, I'll watch the movie. With Malum, it was more, those guys had money to put into marketing to hit beyond that market, to hit, social media in a big way, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, hit a space that was going into more of a mainstream audience. Obviously I'm making the movie for horror fans. But the first movie is very experiential in the sense that it's small, intentionally very. I mean, we made that for such a small budget, almost experimentally so, and relied so much on sound. And that's the kind of movie you could enjoy in a theater, but it's also the kind of movie you could sit at home and put on your headphones and watch on a laptop, and you're going to get like a very intimate experience. Malum was more, it's scary, but it's more visceral.
Yes.
Right? It's more in your face, and it's gorier, and it reaches a level of acceleration that I don't know if I'm any longer scaring the audience in the same way I was with Last Shift, because I'm taking them on an emotional ride that wasn't meant to get in their head the way Last Shift does. If that makes any sense.
It does. It does.
In a different way.
Yeah, it is. It's you are like a filmmaker who is just like, you are I would argue, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your style, you have a relentless, like, your films they don't let up, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and so Malum, I think, is just like, and I totally know what you mean with The Last Shift. So much of what y'all did in camera and with sound, like, you really utilized all of the levers of filmmaking so, like, expertly. But then with Malum, you have more money to do it a different kind of way, and I think that absolutely, like, it's an assault almost, but in a good way.
like your baseball bat.
Yeah, like the baseball bat. Adam Scher, one of my best buddies from high school, which, Adam, I was actually thinking about you the other night because I rewatched Munich, and Adam and I have always been like, this movie rules. But it's so, talk about an assault.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, yeah, it's very good though. But Adam says, hi, Clarke and Anthony, big fan of Malum. Anthony, what was the most difficult part of reimagining the story for that new audience? So I know, for you've talked about how it was exciting to be able to play in a different part of this sandbox. But what was like and I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you sort of saying, like, you were nervous at first that you weren't going to be able to get The Last Shift out of your head, but then once you got going, you were like, oh, I'm not even thinking it, like, throw it out the window. But correct me if I'm, please, tell us more.
That's what I was going to say. Like, the earlier stages, because once you commit to do it, we're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to make this movie. And the earliest days of that were, you're like, sure, yeah, well, we can do that, but then you have to sit down and write it. So Scott and I were writing it, and I included the Welcome Villain guys early on because I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page and use them as a sounding board. So, we literally did like a 3-page treatment. It was kind of like I think we rewatched the original, and Scott and I were like, and this happens, like just vomited nothing on the page because we really didn't know where we were going to take it. And then we sent it to them, and they're like, yeah, like here's a couple new, we like that. And then again, did like maybe a 5-page treatment. And we did that several times because it really was until something clicked in my head with the angle of the movie, what was going to change. And the biggest change was with the lead character and her motivation. So once we knew that her motivation was much different going in, because in the original movie, she's just like, oh, I'm here. It's almost like a video game, right? I'm here. Right. I'm turning on the game. I'm like, I got to do my first day of work. I'm going to do it. And she had no idea what's going on. And then with this movie, she has an intent to go there to discover something about her father. So it really changed the whole layout of the movie in terms of its through line. So once that kind of clicked but from the get-go, I knew we wanted to really expand on the villains because they're barely touched upon in the first movie. And that was fun. I mean, that was fun to do, creating this whole mythology with the flock of the low god.
And I will tell chat, I will brag on you that one of the things you did that I loved, because I'm a mythology nerd, was you sent us these. You sent, the gals who were members of the flock, and I'm sure you sent it to Cheney as well. But the John Mallam's backstory. There's this 2 or 3 page document that is just like John Mallam's story. And I love that because, I mean, look, whether or not you have like the lines, and it's like expressed in dialogue, it's really important for all of us who are in this cult to understand or to come up with and create like why we found ourselves and how we found ourselves into this belief system,
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, it's good to do. I mean, building out the mythology, you want the actors to have that world know, like, okay, why am I here? What am I doing here? How did I get here? Even if it's not in the film, it grounds the actor, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it makes our job so much easier. But it also, and this is like I can't speak for all of us, but I can speak for myself. I like how thorough you are. It's one of one of the reasons I not only like talking to you about movies and life and art and all of that, but why I liked working with you as a director, because I knew that you knew exactly what you were doing, what you wanted. I mean, I can even Morgan Lennon, who played Kitty, who I'm in like all my scenes with. Sweet Morgan was so she knew that script like frontwards and backwards. And I tell you what, Anthony, she'd be like, well, no, this doesn't happen today. And I was like, what? Just to be like, huh? But I was so glad that Morgan, but also that you knew exactly what was going on. And all I had to do was like focus on what was right in front of me.
Yeah.
Because Mallam is a nightmare. When you play in nightmare logic, it's very hard to track like where you are and what you're doing. And so I knew you knew what was going on. And if I couldn't ask you, I could ask Morgan, be like, what the fuck is going on?
Right what's going on? I know,
What are we shooting today? I know. Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of actors are like that though. That like, I mean, a lot of actors I've worked with, they just, not to say you didn't do a ton of homework, because you did, but like, a lot of actors don't want to be burdened by anything except what's in front of them at the moment. So they kind of come in kind of wide-eyed and say, okay, what are we doing? they step on the set and they're like, what are we doing? And I tell them what they're doing.
Yeah.
This is how we're doing it.
That's why we have signs. That's why we get what we're doing on a piece of paper. They go, there you go. But it was funny. It is funny. Like, obviously it's a luxury to shoot in continuity, which of course we didn't. But I think even like reading the script, I kind of was like, I don't know where we are. But I will say I'm also, and if Adam is still in the chat, he can attest to this because we used to do theater together in high school. You know, when we would be blocking, the director would be like, and then there's going to be this, and there's going to be that, and there's going to be all of this. And then, you know, our tech director would come in and he'd be like, here's a sketch. And I'd be like, you can just throw all of that out the window because I have no idea what you're talking about. I am not that my brain just cannot do it. But then once I got on the set, obviously I was like, I get it. I know where I am. I know what we're doing. You know, it's just like, it's just not how my brain works in nightmare logic, which Malum has a lot of.
I also think actors don't really need that information until it's meant to serve them, right?
Yes.
Like in rehearsal or when we're not on set, I don't spend much time saying like, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then that's going to happen, because it's like, well, what is happening right like now?
Yeah.
You know, how are they connecting with their fellow actor and that, you know, what's the moment?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's fun. I remember on our last day of shooting, and then I have 2 more Malum questions for you, and then we'll move on because we've got some great questions in the chat. But I remember on our last day of shooting, I went up to you at our wrap party and I was like, Anthony, I really don't think, like, I just realized how I would have kind of done this differently, how you play a figment of someone's imagination, how you play that, how do you play that? And I was like, I just don't, I really wish I could do it over again. Like, I think I wanted to, and you were like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Which is such like an actory thing to say, but I really didn't. Like, I kind of was just like, oh shit, it's over. And now I feel like I understand how to play the version of this character in Jesse's mind. You know what I mean? Like, but that's a different.
But I mean, that's I think every actor does that. I think that's just a testament to say like, oh, I wish we could do more, right? I wish we could do more of this. Not to say what you did wasn't great. It's just like you want to keep going.
And I think too, when you are playing a supporting character, it's you have to have the awareness as well that like this movie is not about me. Like I'm here to do the best job that I can, but also at the same time, like this is not the Dorothea story. So like it's fine. It's just as long as I'm scary, it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's our job to inhabit this person.
We're all the stars of our own lives.
We sure are.
We sure
are. I have a great question for us here from Instagram. This is from Lowell. And Lowell also left a great question on, I think he did. I've got a bunch of questions, but Lowell's question was, what was all that blood in Malum made of? It looked so real.
It was blood. It was blood.
It was blood.
This is actually, this can riff me into a good story. You want to hear the story? So
I would love to.
Well, Russell Effects, they did the blood. Most effects houses have their own recipes for blood, or they get it from a friend who has blood recipes.
Yeah,
sure. It's a whole thing in the blood business. Consistency, color, and also there's different bloods for different reasons. For clothes, for skin, for tile, everything. But on Last Shift, I said to my effects team, I said, I hate how fake blood looks on glass. It just fake blood on glass looks like gelatin to me. It just, if you ever see fake blood in a movie and it's like coming down a windshield of a car or something, you're like, oh God, that looks so fake. It just doesn't look real. So on on Last Shift, we have the cell door, which is very prominent in the film a lot. It's covered in blood inside and out, and there's a window. So I said to my team, I'm like, can we get real blood to
Oh,
put it on the door? So they went and got pig's blood,
sure.
and fresh as it could be, and we painted the glass and the door with this real blood. And I said, it looks fake. It looks just like the fake blood. It looked just as bad as the fake blood. And then I realized, so the fake blood actually doesn't look as bad as I thought it did. This is actually how blood looks on glass.
Wow.
Now, after we had painted the door with all this blood, of course, we had a few days left of shooting. It just started to rot. And but kind of added to the mystique of what we were doing, like locked in this cell, because it was a real police station in a real cell, but you have this blood painted and it just started to stink. So you just added that like deathly element to the set.
Gross. That's so gross.
But that said, I did not do that on Malum because I was like, it's not worth it. It looks like the fake stuff.
And in that Louisville summer, no thank you.
Oh yeah, wow, that was something else.
So another question we have here from let me get my technical situation going. Here we go. Another question we have from Mandy K. Rogers, one of my dear friends and excellent publicist, actually. What was the most challenging scene to film in Malum?
Well, we had that. I mean, we had Yahtzee the pig on set, right?
Yes, we did.
But the Yahtzee, I'd have to say, was way easier than I had anticipated. But anything, I don't know if you were there that day. We had a humane society person. I don't remember what society they came in on. But the owners of that pig, the pig's like 600 pounds. The owners were so easy to work with and really excited to be there and have the pig in the movie.
Yes, they were.
And we shot a bunch of stuff with the pig on this ground floor. It's super easy. And then the pig came back a second day, and there was stuff they had to the pig had to shoot upstairs. So the pig had to take an elevator and then go outside, and that was a big deal. And we didn't realize how big of a thing it was going to be with the Humane Society there, because they were like, well, the pig can't walk on this and the pig can't walk on that. And the owners are like, the pig can walk on everything. Like, this pig does not have trouble, because I guess sometimes pigs don't like to take steps. They won't do it.
Me neither, to be honest.
Yeah. I won't walk up a step.
I need to be carried everywhere I go.
Yeah. It's just, I hit a sidewalk and I just stand there.
Yep, that's it.
But so that was a pain. Your baseball bat stuff was, fiddly. Yeah, right. Yeah. That was fiddly. Yeah. Because whenever you're dealing with blood and effects, it just never works the way it should. And it takes the momentum out of things, and you make a mess, and that was a whole thing.
You're being so polite.
Like your teeth closed.
You're being so polite. Yes. No, that one was tough. That one was tough because I think too, like, so just for the audience, like, when you're on and this movie had a a decent little budget, but like, I had 2 dresses, and one of them was already, I think, messed up. Like it was covered in stuff. And so I had 2. So I felt like the pressure of, don't get all of this blood from the baseball bat effect on your dress. You know what I mean?
I hate that though. I don't like you thinking about like your dress.
I know, but like, you have to understand too that I like making movies, and so I can't necessarily turn that part off. Like, I'm a director, but like I can't turn that off. But that said, so there was a little bit of like, and because, when you're running behind, which we were not running behind, but special effects, when you do things practically, it's like doing a magic trick.
Yeah.
Sometimes you nail it and then sometimes you don't. It's just, that's what happens with practical. And I don't care if you're the best in the business. It's just,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not going to work. And so that to me was a little frustrating, in that moment. Was like, well, okay, tell me what I need to do and how I need to do it, because I don't want to mess this all up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when the effect doesn't work, or when, it's just, it is what it is. And we were that scene was shot with the handhelds, the little, was it a DV camera or was it
It was a DV camera.
Yeah.
It was a DV camera. It was like from the 90s. And that was something, because we had done a bunch of shooting, right? We were at the police station all that time. And then we went to these DV shoots, about like 2 days of DV shooting. And I wasn't ready for that transition because I couldn't see what was going on. Yeah. And that was really tough. Like, that was really hard to understand what's going on in the frame. You'd have to play it back. And it was also, I felt like I lost a certain element of control with that DV camera. And also performance a little bit, right? Because it's like in a lot of ways, I wish I had both cameras there, because we did that stuff in the station. We had the DV camera and we had but that stuff at the farm was so run and gun.
Yeah. That was a tough day. That was
ticks. We were like, well, don't get attacked. Don't get we're like watching your back. Don't let spiders in the barn. Like, there was stuff everywhere to kill you, and
don't fall in a hole.
It was just a lot. It was a lot to deal with.
It was, and it was very hot during the day, and then it was very cold at night, and wardrobe was not ready for that, and we're covered in blood. That for me was always the hardest part, was when you're covered in, actually, so speaking of the blood, wait, I feel like somebody else had a question about blood, but speaking of the blood, fake blood is annoying to perform in, right? Yeah. I just have been seeing Theo James talk about, like, one of his questions for the monkey was, what's it like to be covered in all that blood? And he's like, not great. Yeah. But for me, the stuff that we were drenched in that was slick looking was cold. And that was the hardest part, was being in all of these. Because, when you're I'm from the South. So when you're in the South, everything usually has these newer buildings, have these insane air conditioning systems, which is great, but also it gets cold. And so that was if you asked me, like, what was more uncomfortable, the fake blood, which is sticky and it's hard to move and it's all that stuff, or the slicked down, like, gel, that stuff I didn't like. Because also you can't wrap yourself up,
That's right. Yeah. Because it also, like, it brings down your body temperature, right? It's not just cold, but it's like limiting your body temperature.
Yep. Such is art.
Blood is a weird thing, because I always try to get the actor past that uncomfortable headspace, depending on what side of the event you're on, right? Yes. You're either the person who's causing the bloodshed, or you're the person receiving the bloodshed. Now, if you're the person receiving the bloodshed, then I think it's okay to have that sense of uncomfortableness. Yes. I don't know if you ever remember Candyman.
Yeah.
Virginia Madsen is undressing in the police station. And, she's like fully undressing, and she's just covered in all that blood. And you can really tell she was using it. That uncomfortable. I mean, you can feel, you see it, like her bra, like pulling from her flesh, and like her having to take off her shirt. Like, you could see that she was like, I'm using what this feels like. But then, like, someone like you, who's meant to be the aggressor, whenever I have an aggressor, I'm like, listen, you have to get beyond what the blood feels like on your body, because real blood is also going to feel sticky and warm and dry and feel uncomfortable. But when you're the zealot, you don't care, right? You want to be covered in it, so you have to like try
Enjoy
to
it.
find that place that you're not worried about. Well, what are my clothes doing, or like what am I touching that I shouldn't be touching, and things like that.
Yes. Yeah, there's a fun BTS photo of me with the bag on my head just doing this and like sitting up straight, like not to, because but it wasn't because I was like in a moment or like staying focused. I just was like, don't move. Just
Don't
don't
move.
move.
Don't
This
touch
is
anything.
fine. Just stay here because then they're gonna have to get me wet again, and I really don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, last Malum questions. And of course, you knew that they were coming, but it got asked twice, both by Raul, Jane. The film was amazing. Can we expect a sequel? And our friends at Macabre Daily. Any plans for expanding the Malum story for a sequel? Any plans, Anthony?
I mean, I think there's always plans. I
There
think
are.
it's been doing well financially, and it takes time to kind of get to that place, and then we'll start having those conversations. But we have ideas of where we could take it, right? More Dorothea, more Flock of the Low God.
Of course.
Um,
I do. A lot of people did tell me, actually, and I know it's me, so grain of salt, but a lot of folks were like, I really enjoyed the movie. And also, the cult was so interesting. They were like, more cult.
More cult, yeah. I think that's the right. I mean, that is the main thing we rectified, and
Yes.
intentionally rectified from Alum, is like we're going to push this further with the cult. Well, and then they made the game. Welcome William. If anyone here who's not familiar with the Flock of the Low God game that they released in stages, they're still doing segments of it,
Wow.
which is freaky. It's a cool game they put together.
I love that.
Are you in it? I think you're in it.
I think they scan. I think kind of I'm
Did they
in
do
it,
like
but
a
not.
scaling or like something?
They shot me on a green screen. It was,
Yeah.
but
They own you. They can do anything with your likeness.
They sure can. Enjoy, Team Welcome Villain. Enjoy this old thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, more cults, more sequels. ZSH has a great question here. Based on things I've heard you say in the past, Anthony, it sounds like you still definitely work in film out of a genuine passion for the craft. As someone who spends a lot of time thinking about the eternal struggle between art and commerce, do you have any sort of philosophy regarding filmmaking for the love of craft over considering it your day job?
I mean, that's a tough one. I started as a producer, so I've always had a firm grip into the financing side of things. Not to say that I'm good at raising financing, because I'm not. Or let's say I've never been pushed to that point where I've kind of gone off on my own to raise financing.
Right.
But whenever I'm jumping into a movie, I always talk to the producers on their level in terms of commerce as well, because I think that's important. But the business is tough in general, because I've been able to do writing jobs and take a lot of directing gigs, and in some ways that's a double-edged sword, because I think you want to be Tarantino-esque with how selective he is with doing projects.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you make you're Tarantino, right? And you make Reservoir Dogs, and that leads to I love Jackie Brown, but that Pulp Fiction and then Jackie Brown. But Jackie Brown could have been his misstep, right? That could have been the one at the time when it came out.
Right.
But he was able to really hold on to his pennies at the early stages and do, okay, this is what I want to do next. Or a lot of us are like, well, where's my next job in the business? And you do take things you maybe wouldn't because you want the job or need the job. So it's a balance. I mean, I'm sure, and it's the same for actors too. It's like, you're like, do I really want to do this part? but I
Yeah.
should do it. It's an opportunity. I'm meeting, I know the conversation. I'm meeting new people.
Yes.
They could turn out to be a good ally in the future. All that. Right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, I think it's like Kevin Pollak is the one that I've heard. Oh, he on his podcast, he used to, or he doesn't have the show anymore, but he always used to say that like actors and by proxy entertainment industry professionals are the only real professional that is penalized or like it's looked down upon if you take a job just for the money.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, but it's my job.
Yeah.
This is my job. And I do think too that might be like a very I think there is something about in America specifically, like we don't prioritize the arts. We don't like
Yeah.
invest in the arts. And so it is seen as a luxury to do this job because and it's like unless you're Brad Pitt, like it's really I'm not complaining, but it is not luxurious,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and yeah, I in fact like and I when I say I never, I mean truly, I rarely turn down an audition. Rarely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But today I actually turned one down. One because is it great to get a book a job and like it was TV and it was a character that didn't even have a name,
Yeah.
and when you do that, like you joke, but I joke, it's like I'm working for tape. Like I need to have a clip of someone
Yeah.
of me as a I don't know, an elementary school teacher. That's not what the audition today was, but it's like, should I book it? If I'm gonna go in for elementary school teacher, and so I need a clip of me doing that so someone can consider me to play an elementary school teacher with a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, but today the it just wasn't. It did not suit me, and and I always check with my agent too and say like, is it a bad look if we like how because that's an industry.
Yeah,
exactly. And also that's an industry consideration too. Like my agent has a boss. And so if I'm this client that only books once or twice a year, now granted it's been slow, but like, and I'm turning down auditions, I don't know. How does that make me look? Do they want to bump me, to put, so that is sort of the commerce side.
Yeah.
And then the art, but then the art side to me is like finding the art in every job, even if it is for hire,
Yeah. I mean, you have to be excited about. I've never worked on anything that I wasn't excited about or didn't get excited about. Because I think the process is worth getting excited about. Again, I'm always working with actors. That process, I'm working with the whole team. Like you should enjoy that process, or maybe it's not worth doing. Are we answering the question? Pull up the question again. Are we hitting it?
ZSH, did we answer your question? No, I feel like that's a good. What's your philosophy? Any sort of philosophy on filmmaking for the love of craft over considering it your day job? I mean, I think you answered that question.
Did you watch Sean Baker's speech?
I did.
Yeah, I mean that's a good. Like he kind of addresses all those things in that speech really well.
We are at a very strange point in the entertainment industry in that I'm listening. Do you listen to You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's podcast?
Mm-mm.
So it's a exploration of stories from the first 100 years of Hollywood. And she's done a bunch of really great series, but right now she's doing one called The Old Man Is Still Alive, which is about iconic directors in their last 10 or so years, specifically in the 60s and the 70s, when the industry, much like we're experiencing now, was sort of corporatized and just it was losing money, and that famous sort of overinvestment in musicals, when of course then and them flopping, which allows your Easy Rider, Raging Bulls to come in and sort of revolutionize. So anyway, though, she's pointing out and sort of exploring and explaining like you know, how, like, I think, was it Shell or some oil company takes over Paramount, and now you have business people making these decisions about
Yeah.
what gets made, right? But at the same time, you have Robert Evans in, kind of overseeing Paramount, and he is obviously interested in commerce, but like supporting pop art,
Yeah.
And I think, to me, with what Sean Baker was saying, the inflection point is like, we have to, we are doing a job, and like the fact that Brady, or the director, Brady Corbett, is that right? The director of The Brutalist?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, is talking about how upfront he made no money for The Brutalist, and Sean Baker is talking similarly. Like, that's not a joke. Like, that's not hyperbole. And I don't know what I don't know what we do about that,
Yeah. And listen, those guys now are in a position to get that next bigger paying job. I don't know if Sean wants that next bigger paying job because he's very specific about it. He does, but the director who did The Brutalist, like, that's a very unique situation because they made that movie for $6 million.
Right.
But that's because you trade time for cost, right?
Yep.
People are like, that's impossible, but it's not. The way he did it wasn't impossible. That's why he didn't make any money,
Yes.
and continues to struggle because he's not going to see any money, like, from The Brutalist. The Brutalist isn't blowing, like, it's not, but the next job he gets,
Right.
that's going to give him that paycheck.
Right.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fingers crossed is right. And ZSH says, just this casual conversation about it, about the topic, answers a lot. Love it. So ZSH is satisfied.
Okay.
So you've done a great job. And Stephanie says, I agree. It's odd folks have that belief in the creative space. I do find that a silly view. You sold out. Well, I earned money to do my chosen job. So no.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's for sure. Another Mr. Lizard had a great question here saying, and this is a great transition, I think. I have a vague memory of reading somewhere that Anthony had written a draft of the Damnation game because of his association with Clive Barker. Is this something he'd like to revisit? So, one, is that true, Anthony? And two, I would love to talk a little bit more about Clive and your relationship with Clive.
Good segue. It's like you planned that. No, I did do the Damnation game. It was at Warner Brothers at the time. It had been there for a while, and then I got hired to write it, did a completely new draft, and we had Anton Fuqua attached to the project.
Oh, wow.
It just didn't. Anton went and made that Suge Knight documentary, and then it just kind of fizzled out. I still love it, though. I still love, it's fun. This business is weird, especially when you have things like rights to Clive's material, and then it gets tangled in a quagmire, and everyone you hire on it, you're building money against it and interest, and it's funny. There's this abandonment quality of Hollywood, like you do it, you put all this work into something, you take the shot, and if it doesn't go, it's like it goes away for some reason. It's like, oh well, that's so last year. Like, what's next? And you always have to have that what's next mentality, but there is something that's like, well, why not that too? And sometimes it comes back around. Who knows? Damnation game may come back around someday.
It might. It may.
I mean,
well,
they're doing Thief of Always now with Jennifer Lynch directing.
That
was something we adapted a lot. Yeah, Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer.
Kent. Sorry. Lynch is a different Jennifer, but yes,
she's not. Kent's doing it.
Yes. No, I love that pairing too. And I only read The Thief of Always in the last couple of years, and I was just sort of blown away. I was like, how has this not been a movie yet?
Yeah.
It's so well suited for it. But, I wanted to talk about adaptation because, or adaptations, because certainly it's a road I am currently walking down as well. But and it seems to me the more I talk to filmmakers, the more their story of how they got associated with the rights and how they did it is like it's always a little different. So can you talk a little bit about your, first of all, the adaptation process, or how you acquired the rights to make Dread, and can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Clive Barker, who I know you're still close with?
Yeah, I mean, the basic rundown. I'll give you the short story. Well, I was going to Emerson College in Boston. I went to Emerson because they had an LA extension program.
Yes.
So I moved to LA my last semester of college to do the LA extension program. Now, this was back in 2002. While you're there, you're living at the Oakwoods Apartments, which is now something different.
Right.
And you're taking, I only had one class, and the class I signed up for was a horror, like a history of horror class.
Nice.
Strangely enough. And you had to get an internship or they'd send you home. Right. So, you're there, you're pounding the pavement, trying to get an internship, that's your first experience with like Hollywood. You're like, oh, yes. I have an interview on the lot of Paramount. I get to go drive on Paramount. And I'm like, that was exciting. I ended up getting an internship at Marvel Studios. And so Kevin Feige was there and Avi Arad was there together. And they had just done the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. Great. So it was really quiet there. I'm surprised I got the internship because I told them, I was like, well, I'm a DC fan primarily, but I was honest with them. I'm like, yeah. I know comics well. I mean, I read Marvel comics, but I'm like, I primarily read Batman and DC comics. And I knew not, like, I was well versed enough in comics that I got that internship, but it wasn't extremely busy. And I didn't want to waste. I knew, I was like, I don't think this is going to turn into a job.
Right.
So I know I said I was going to tell the short story, but geez, I'm like, not
we got
time. So I called my advisor. I was like, listen, is there another internship I could take in the horror space? I love special effects. I was doing a lot of special makeup effects in college and in high school, and I was like, I don't need credit. I just don't want to waste the time. So she sent me a list of like John Carpenter's people and Wes Craven's people and Clive's. Joe Daley was at Clive Barker's. I had, strangely enough, just picked up the Nightmare on Elm Street box set, this massive DVD box set that they released.
I remember it.
Yeah, that's such a good compilation. The behind the scenes stuff and like the retrospective stuff on that is really good. And Clive's all over it. And I was watching the way because I was obviously a fan of Candyman and Hellraiser. I knew his movies. I had never read his books. But I really liked how he spoke about horror and the business. And so when I saw his name pop up, I was like, I feel like I'd get along with him. And then Joe was from Massachusetts. So that was my like in, right? I was like, I hounded Joe every day for a few weeks and was like, hey, you need an intern. And finally he brought me in. But that day he brought me in, it was Clive's house, and Clive was in that meeting. So I was like, sat down with Clive and Joe, and that was it. That was the meeting. And I got along with Clive well. We talked about comics and things like that. And then I started interning with them.
That's great.
So that was right. I got that job. They hired me as an assistant before I graduated. So that just comes down to like just being at the right place at the right time for that meeting. And yeah, I worked with him. It started as an assistant and then an executive and started producing. And we just had his library at our disposal. Yeah. So it wasn't like he had rights tied up of some things at various places, like Thief of Always was at Universal Studios, and Hellraiser was obviously in a quagmire with the Weinsteins for so many years.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So there was that stuff, but we had so much material. So when I got there, I just read everything. He had this big library with all his books in all these different languages. I just read everything, read all his stories, all his books, and got very well versed on how he wrote and how he spoke and how he thought. And I got close to him that way. So like adapting his material became easier for me.
Yeah.
But the first thing I did was no one was doing it with anything with Thief of Always. It almost got made into a Sondheim musical, like very, very close. Like literally Sondheim had Clive loves Sondheim, and Sondheim had written all the music for the musical, and then they pulled the plug at the last minute. It was an animated musical, animated.
Wow.
But I loved that book so much, and I said, I'm just going to adapt it. And I hadn't written, I wrote stuff in college, but I don't think I had ever written like a full screenplay. So I just took his book and adapted it into a very faithful adaptation because I just loved the book so much. And it was like 100 pages script, and I showed it to Clive. He was like, "Oh wow!" He's like, "This is really good." I'm like, "Well, of course it is. You wrote it for you, basically." Yeah. I just made it, fit into a screenplay. And then he was like, "Feel free to adapt anything you want of mine." Now with things like, and then I started like, I adapted Pig Blood Blues, which got close to getting made, and things that, but like, for like Damnation Game and stuff, I had to get hired by the studio. Mm-hmm. But by that point, I had like an agent and was kind of like doing a lot of Clive stuff.
Yeah.
I rambled.
Yeah.
Did that answer? What was the question?
Yes. No, it was great. Jeremy says more story. So this is good. No, I think, it's something I've learned doing adaptations is I think they can be honestly some of the most fun writing if you're doing it for yourself, meaning like you don't, I would imagine maybe if you were working for somebody who was like, okay, it's your job, or I've hired you to do this adaptation, but I want you to do my version of this adaptation versus your own version of the adaptation, that could be very challenging. And, but and in my experience, like when you're just doing it because the author is taking a chance on you or likes you and responds to your take, that is just, it's so fun. Like, it's so fun. It feels like a puzzle. It feels like it does.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And Damnation Game was one of the ones that was hard because it was in one of those situations where they wanted to make the movie, but they didn't want to make the book. So I did so many drafts of that script. And you're like just racking your brain, like, what's the answer to fix the equation? And then finally we kind of like cracked it in a way that got Fuqua attached. So that was a really challenging thing because, as a fan of the book, you're like, well, why don't we just make the book? Why don't we just do the book? But that's why like Dread was independent. So we had wrangled it away from the studios, and then we were able to do it, finance it independently and shoot it in the UK. We did adapt the short story, and I expanded on it in a way that I thought made sense, but the short story was still intact in the movie.
Right. What do you think the key to, because, especially like The Monkey came out last weekend, and, James Wan and Oz Perkins have been doing the rounds talking about adapting Stephen King. Like, what does that require to do a quote unquote good adaptation of Stephen King? And a lot of what they've been saying is well, if you're adapting a short story, it fits a feature a little easier, if you're
Mhm.
dealing with King. Whereas the novels, usually, if you have the luxury of doing a mini series or a longer version,
Yeah.
then that's. But do you have any thoughts on adapting Clive's work? Because so much of it is in the pop culture, is in the zeitgeist, and yet, like I really love Candyman, but it's and same with Hellraiser. I love Hellraiser. I love Clive's movie. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think it is legitimately good and weird and scary and just such an incredible home run, like for your debut feature. But it is, I mean, it's kind of different, but not. Like, I don't know. Do you have, and of course the franchise has gone on to be all about the Cenobites,
Yeah.
which is never quite worked the way that maybe it should. So what do you think the secret or the secret sauce is to adapting Clive Barker?
Clive's tricky because he's not King in the sense that he's King is obviously the guy who put Clive on the map, with that quote, "I've seen the future of horror." His name is Clive Barker, right? So it's interesting, and it's funny because they probably weren't that different in age, right?
Mm,
I don't know how old King is now. 80?
70s maybe?
So, yeah, like
Yeah.
Clive's in his like 72 now.
Okay.
Um, so it wasn't like some old timer, like greasing the path for some young kid. They weren't that
Right.
far off in age. Clive's work is very poetic and psychosexual and dark, and in a way that when we had set his projects up at studios, it was a very unique position. It was great when Clive was directing because I
Hmm.
think he had a very specific vision of the films he made. And when you watch his films, you can see his style.
Hmm.
And then Candyman with the Philip Glass score took it elevated. That was an elevated story that reached a much bigger audience. Um, but it's really challenging to find that middle ground with his material, whereas you're not, because my instincts are like, put it all in there, put it in there.
Yeah.
Even like with Midnight Meat Train,
Hmm.
was it a mistake that we called that movie Midnight Meat Train? We debated it. We had posters made called Midnight Train, and like it was a
Mm.
big thing. And but when you're in it and you're in the heat of the moment, and Clive's like, "No, it's got to be Midnight Meat Train," and we're all like, "It's got to be Midnight Meat Train," and you're like, "Does it though? Does it need to be Midnight Meat Train? Is
Yeah.
it what is that conjuring in people's minds?"
Right.
And a lot of Clive stuff is like that. He doesn't shy away from sexuality at all,
Right.
and I tried not to in Dread. I tried to, even where he was slacking, I tried to add those kind of psychosexual elements in Dread even. Um, so I think if it was easy, you'd see a lot more Clive movies made.
Agreed.
And Clive doesn't write as fast as King. He's
Hmm.
more on the George R.R. Martin path right now. Um, but his storytelling is just profound. I mean, he'll write me a text message and I'll be like, dude, like that's poetic and heartbreaking in every single way. He writes in novella. It's very interesting how his mind works.
I think there's also the fantasy element. Stephen King, whether you're creating monsters, whether he's creating like creatures or whatever, there's always a very sort of, it takes place here. The creature is this, it's a
Mm-hmm.
clown, it's like you can see it, you can imagine. But with Clive, the fantasy element cannot be removed from his work, and fantasy's expensive.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's also hard for people, especially business people who are not paid to be creative.
yeah.
um that's even harder for them to get on board with. And so, yeah, I can, you know, I love Hellbound, Hellraiser 2.
Yeah,
I But I also appreciate that the movie was able to go to the fantasy and play in that world, because
yeah,
as we've seen, I mean, the Hellraiser franchise was not able to, they just were like, nope, this is a crime procedural from now on, which is like wild.
yeah, yeah.
It's just totally wild. But yeah, I think the fantasy, probably, you're right. Like, he's not as quick as Stephen King, of course. And also, you know, fantasy is hard to explain to people who aren't creative, I think.
It is, yeah. That's the challenge with the executives was always very hard to get them to buy into something. Whereas, we're like, just do that, just do it, and it will all work out. Money's a separate element too, of course.
Sure.
With it, like a project like Weave World, they've been trying to get made, still trying to
Yes.
get made, so many years trying to get Weave World made. And it's such a big fan. It's in a Magica. People are always like, how do you make a Magica? And rising to those challenges, the fantasy element is, but now's the time to do it. If ever there was a time, it's now. I mean, 20 years ago, it was a lot harder. The technology has caught up with his storytelling.
Yeah, for sure. Well, ZSH says in the chat, and by the way, ZSH, if you listen to the episode of Screen Drafts that Anthony and I are on, which the topic was cults, we talk about this movie. ZSH says, Mandy is probably one of the favorite horror movies amongst my friend group. Been excited for a while to recommend Malum to them all. I then let them know that Clarke is a friend of mine. Yes, but I love that you bring up Mandy, because I think, to me, and we talked about this briefly on the podcast, but like, when I saw Mandy and the creatures, or like the demons, or whatever you want to call them, came up, and this was before Dave Bruckner got the Hellraiser job, I was like, that's the Cenobites. Yeah. These are what I envision the Cenobites to be. If you're not going to be Doug Bradley and, like, what the OG, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Mandy, you'd think, and also I wish that, A24 and Neon, like all these guys, all these companies, like, they loved Mandy, they loved promoting Mandy, but unfortunately it didn't lead to more movies like Mandy.
Which is surprising that it hasn't, that they haven't. Maybe it's a Nicolas Cage thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't, that movie wouldn't be Mandy without Cage, right?
Right.
I mean, the world is still very interesting, but I mean, I think he's the driving force behind that picture. The energy, as if you, with a pumping heart that is Nicolas Cage.
Yes. And the commitment. That's one of the things that I think, like, if you're gonna really make a hard R, fantasy tinged revenge horror movie, you have to be so committed. Nobody can half-ass that, and I think that's what makes Nick Cage perfect. Is and it, for my money, and I've said this many times, I love Nick Cage. Unironically, I think he is a fantastic actor, but you will never find another actor that is more committed. Like, he is the most committed actor to that world, and that, I think, is like the linchpin.
Yeah. We battled over Mandy in our
No, we came together on Mandy. We both agreed. I put Mandy on the list, and then you vetoed it because it wasn't high enough.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. You put it like first. I'm like, it's too low on the list.
I didn't think that. I didn't know. I didn't know your journey, Anthony.
I didn't know your journey.
I love that. So another question here from chat, and this is sort of echoed a couple of times over. Brian Knight says, what are your 3 favorite horror filmmakers? And similarly, Stephen Keller on Patreon asked, what are 5 essential horror movies or books for newbies? So this is really just our little recommendation corner, I would say. But, like, if you're, what are some of your favorite horror filmmakers? And then
I don't like questions like this because I
pleading the fifth. No question.
What's funny is, like, I growing up on Carpenter and Barker and Craven, and it's weird to the movies I make are not the movies I watch.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
The movies that I revisit every year are like Fright Night and like Joel Schumacher's Lost Boys and like these are movies that have a place in my heart that I go to over and over again. And I mean, I like The Substance a lot. Mm-hmm. Natalie loved The Substance. That was a movie that I was like, that was a vision from a very strong filmmaker that mm-hmm. I really got behind. I haven't seen The Monkey yet.
It's fun.
I'm gonna see it this week.
It's really fun.
It looks fun. It looks funner than Longlegs in a way.
Oh, 1,000%.
1,000 times, yes.
I mean, yes, truly, but just so different, like so different. But
yeah, as far as literature goes, listen, I'm always going to go. If you have not read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, you just have to, because a lot of people ignore the classics. I think Frankenstein is one of the best books. I think Richard Matheson's I Am Legend is a book that I just love that book, love it, and have read it several times.
Anthony, are we the same person?
We are. Ding ding. How about you? What are your recommendations, Clarke?
Well, I always like listening to what people are looking for, kind of. So to be fair, like these are very vague questions, but like, I think that like, how do I say, some of my favorite horror directors, like if I had to pick, I mean, I'm a big Wes Craven person. He was my guy of the Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter, of that swath of Romero, about those guys. So I could pick a couple of Wes Craven movies that I would recommend to, I think Scream on just objectively is one of the best genre, and because it has so much going for it, and also Wes's mastery of the craft mixed with Kevin's fresh words, like you know what I mean. It just was, to me, this perfect, it was a perfect combination. Combo, yeah. Yes, exactly.
I have some Ghostface posters on it. I mean, to me, growing like out of the masters.
Yeah.
Craven has made my two favorite, like Freddy Krueger and Ghostface are my two favorite like horror icons. 100%. I think I gravitate towards Carpenter's movies as a whole more. His like they live in his sci-fi projects. Mm-hmm. Because I love Kurt Russell and he worked with Kurt Russell so many times. But I'm with you. Like Scream is hard to. And it sounds so like, mainstream, right? We're like those people, I know. But, Scream is one of the only franchises. I talked about this on something the other day, but like, the slasher genre came up as like, oh, you commit a sin, you die, right? Those are the rules. The rules, and Scream was the first one that made a bunch of characters that we didn't want to see die. And that franchise was successful because they didn't kill those characters, right? It's like you didn't want to see them die, and they didn't die at the end. And that was a trend that went on through all three of those movies. I mean, you lost a couple along the way, but the core group, that's why it was a shame they killed Dewey, in that recent film. I think that was a mistake. I think they regret doing it. Because I don't think anyone wanted that to happen.
That's true. Although I do feel like they needed to show that they had teeth and that anyone could go. It's true, because I gotta say, like, listen, this last Scream movie, I just was like, nobody's dying.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but we have to have some of these characters die. And the example I always give is Mason Gooding's character in the last one. He has this beautiful arc. It's this very noble death. It is a moment that is really heartfelt and like powerful. And then they totally just say, JK, never mind, he made it. And you're like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
understand that Mason Gooding is a gorgeous man. He's a hot star. He's this and that. But like, there's no stakes. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
There's just no stakes to these movies anymore, and that so I do, but of course I would say that we do miss Dewey's energy. Like that foil for Gale was really important because that character is sticking around, and so
Yeah.
yes, I I understand the argument.
There's some, and I know this is like nerd shit, but there's something about the legacy of storytelling that, I always think about it like Ripley and Alien.
Yeah.
Like, she was alive for like 2 weeks. If you sum up the time that she survived,
Yeah.
right, from Alien to Alien 5, you get like 2 weeks of life, right? And that's it. I mean, and then you say like, well, okay, well, that's how that ended. I was really bummed they didn't end up making that reboot with Neil Blomkamp.
Yes.
I was like, because I think Alien 3 is one of the biggest missteps in cinema history. Not to say it's a bad movie. I mean, Fincher made a good film aside from some of the effects in that film, but that's not his fault. But it upended a franchise that was on such a trajectory. And
yes, great
point. I don't know how you spend a whole movie saving this little girl and then you kill her off screen in the next movie, and it's like, oh, and so that's the legacy of that character Ripley, and you see what she accomplished in part 2, and then how it led her to, again, like 2 weeks of survival. And then the same with Scream. You want, do any of these characters get happy endings? You just keep making movies until they all die, and then you're like, oh, well, that sucks. Like, oh, well, they did. You look from their trajectory from part 1, to part 6, and you're like, oh, well, shit, they got him eventually.
But this is the problem with the slasher, the subgenre, is because I was talking about this the other day. Like, we can culturally, we love to laud the final girl, but if you think about like what happens the second after the final girl, like the camera, the credits roll, the final girl has just watched all of her friends and some of her family die. She's gotten the shit beat out of her. She is traumatized for life, and if she survived, she's probably barely hanging on. So like, that's the thing that is the problem with slasher franchises. If like, and that's actually why I think Nightmare on Elm Street, and again, Nightmare on Elm Street of, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare, Nightmare comes last. So it actually has the luxury of sort of like going, okay, well, what would I do a little different? Like, how would I fix this sort of thing? But Nightmare, Freddy can terrorize anyone in their dreams, which I think is the smartest way to keep stuff like that going. Whereas if Michael Myers is like, okay, he's always after Laurie, or, he's just, to me, Halloween sequels don't work when Laurie is not involved, because you're like, but what is he doing? Like, why?
What's he doing?
What are you up to? What are you up to? And, so, it's a tricky thing with the subgenre in general. But, another one that like I would recommend to people if they wanted like, a 70s kind of slasher movie, I actually wouldn't recommend Halloween first. I would recommend Bob Clark's Black Christmas. I'm a huge Bob Clark's Black Christmas fan, but I think that characters are so relatable and funny. That's the thing, is like, it's funny and also scary. Like speaking of sound, the sound mix and like the voices and just all of it. I love it.
Great. Yeah,
for sure. And it's funny you brought up Frankenstein because I did a little Instagram live right before we went live to tell people to come on over here. And someone in chat was like, what is your most anticipated movie of the year? and I said Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Oh, all
I
right.
mean, he has. I feel like aside from At the Mountains of Madness, Guillermo has never wanted to make something more
Yeah.
than Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
This is the one, right?
This is the one. So
have high expectations.
yeah, I mean, I'm and also Guillermo is my favorite living director. So that is very in line with my sensibilities. I'm very curious what this is going to be and what it's going to look like.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm curious how faithful of an adaptation it will be, or if he's going to kind of venture off.
Same. Yeah. We'll see is right.
We'll see. Or if it's going to get into like the bride stuff and things like that.
Right. And of course we have Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride coming soon. And that sounds like it's a big departure from maybe what we would expect. So that's interesting and different.
Like a true romance Frankenstein movie.
Yeah.
It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool though.
And also maybe a musical?
Is it a musical?
Or are there musical numbers?
Like a rock and roll,
like Putting on the Ritz. No, I'm just
could be rock and roll monster movie.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So IMDb says, let's play the game called IMDb says. Okay?
Yeah.
IMDb says that you won Best Short Film for the comedy The Test at the Sun Valley Film Festival, and Jodie Foster presented you the award. Is this true?
It is true.
But
I wasn't there.
What?
Yeah.
IMDb. Oh my gosh.
But she did present me the award, but I was not in attendance.
Okay. Did you know that Jodie Foster was?
No, I didn't. I didn't know.
Because you would have been there.
I would have went. Yeah, I would have went. Like son of a.
We used to play this game. We used to play this game on my Twitch show all the time. Of like, I'm gonna read you IMDb trivia about you or about your movie, and you tell me if this is true,
correct or incorrect. Yeah.
And this is how it always was. It would 9 times out of 10 be like, "This is true." But and then there's always
see Wikipedia page.
So tell me about this comedy. Like, okay, here's a question. We know you for horror. We know you for crime. Crime movies. Like Gish Gali asked on Discord. I seem to remember you, meaning me, mentioning that Anthony is a big cop fan. Which I don't know if I phrased it like that, but like there are a lot of police officers in your work. So if there are any detectives or from books, TV, or movies that Anthony would like to adapt, like I want to kind of talk a little bit about outside of the horror space, because you have directed things that are not just The Last Shift and Malum and so on. Like, can you talk a little bit about all that?
I mean, I don't, there's a lot of things that I write and that me and my wife write not in the horror space. I'd say that most of my writing jobs are not in the horror space. And I think that comes from the first, the movie that got me into the Writers Guild was an Edgar Allan Poe fantasy film, a children's fantasy film. And that was like the trajectory of my career at the time when I was writing things or like setting projects up. And, those things, they're bigger budgets, they don't get made. Right. And so in the horror space, it's much easier to get things made. And I've had more success. But when you look at like, Missionary is a thriller, kind of like a Fatal Attraction thriller.
Yes.
The Test was a friend of mine, Patrick Fischler, and who's an actor, and his wife Lauren Bowles, who was on True Blood. They wanted to do this short that they wrote, and that it was like a comedy relationship dramedy in a bathroom. I think it's on my Vimeo page if anyone wants to see it. But the cop thing, I'm trying to think. that was kind of random, really. I mean,
Mm,
I don't know if I have like some. When I make those movies, I like to
mhm.
involve police. I mean, like, when we did Last Shift, was very adamant about getting the police involved to make sure that we were not faking anything. And the same
Yes.
with Malum. We had we had several officers in Kentucky on Malum. Um, Not sure if any of them hit on you while you were on set. But there was a few.
Absolutely not. But I mean, I was single at that. I still am. If you want to give them my number, although I don't know if I want to go out with Kentucky
Kentucky town,
PD.
Kentucky PD.
That might not be for me.
So when I'm in the process, I definitely like to have them involved and make sure
Sure.
that we're doing it the right way and that we're not faking anything. But I don't know if there's a lot of police procedural other things that I've written outside of that. I don't think so, or
Hmm.
like not. It's not something I gravitate towards really. A little Sherlock Holmes. I used to like Castle a lot. I like dug that show a lot.
Castle's fun.
Nathan
Who doesn't
Fillion.
like Nathan Fillion? Who
Exactly.
doesn't? He's a charming man.
He's a charming man.
He sure is. Yeah, it's interesting, the police thing, because it's such a good it's there like the concept of a police officer, especially if you're dealing with horror or a murder or a mystery, is just like you kind of have to have one. It's very
Mhm.
hard to do it without, like, even Dewey, like, to use Scream
Yeah.
as an example. But
Yes.
Kevin does it in such a way where, you like this person and they're endearing and they're charming, and so you want to be on their side, right? And similar with, the lead and character in both Malum and The Last Shift, these are, and it's a female police officer, which I think is already an interesting component.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the challenge with both of those movies is that you have a competent person. They were both competent people in a situation where they were on a job. And it undercuts your fear element by quite a lot when you're making a movie, because they're armed, they're logical, and they don't really they're in a profession where I believe that if they've taken the oath and they believe in it, they're not going to run away from danger.
Right.
So that was like a starting point with both those movies, that I was like, okay, well, if you have someone that's armed, logical, and has a sense of duty, not just the sense of duty, but let's add an emotional layer on top of that, being like,
right,
my father was a cop, a legacy, then it was an interesting place to start from.
Yeah.
Of how do you scare that person and break that person down. We have a detective. I won't talk about it too much, but you read our last script.
Yes.
The detective in that, how did that guy work out?
Well, I think I remember liking that. Oh, well, he's a romantic interest, though.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yes, and I liked that, actually, because, of course, like, for chat and anybody watching, I immediately was like, so Anthony, can we make this movie? Can I play this part, please? And I'm trying to, like, I gotta get famous enough so that I can get this movie greenlit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I really love the script, and obviously any feedback I had was just like, how can we make it better and better and
Great
better?
feedback, yeah.
But that police officer character, the romantic interest, like, I think I even remember he was kind of not a bro, and he wasn't dumb, but he was a little light. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I liked that. I thought that was actually very interesting, kind of like Dewey, right? If you want to not like that, he wasn't inept. Dewey that's actually a bad comparison. But I think if you're going to have this romantic, hunky hero who's also not so serious, or he's not like a bully, that's a really great juxtaposition to what we would maybe assume the cop character would be. You know what I mean? So I like that.
We based it off of Cop Friends we have in Boston. It's
Yeah.
it's a certain kind of people in Boston. Certain demeanor people have.
And
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to change the subject. So
let's change it.
You're like,
yeah.
I write love stories too, which is shocking. Romance with a twist, always with a twist, but it's there. We got some.
Well, this is the type of stuff though that I definitely enjoy as a viewer, because like a straight romance is not going to be interesting to me, but I do think that's why, to use that example of this spec that you and Natalie wrote, like that love story was compelling. It was interesting because it was against this backdrop of a horror story,
Yeah.
I have a friend, his name's Phil Iscove, and he's a TV writer, but he hosts a podcast called Podcast Like It's. And one time in conversation, because he knows me as a horror person, which I'm like, I like other things, it's not just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I did accidentally say the words to him one time. I hate romance.
You're like, just in general.
Which I will never live down for Phil.
You'll always regret.
Truly. He will always only bring me on to talk about like The Descent. He will never bring me on to talk about anything that is not just the scariest movie ever made. But, I think that I just love genre. So whether it is a love story cloaked in a horror movie, whether it is a mystery, whether it is, all of it. It's just like that to me is just, yeah. I don't know why though. I just don't love the straightforward,
Well, we have a project that the closest thing I'd say, it's more like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is a romance through and through with a twist. And it doesn't have some big fantasy twist. It's grounded enough, but
yes,
you go on that. I feel like romances that don't have it. I mean, obviously, unless you're like making Pretty Woman, right? You need or a Nora,
right?
Yeah, I mean, that you have to have your what's the hook for a romance? Right. There's always a hook. Because if it doesn't have a hook, that means there's someone dying of cancer, and that's never fun.
And sometimes
I can't watch that shit anymore.
And sometimes it's a literal hook, like if you're Candyman.
Yeah, that's a romance. I mean, Candyman was a romance.
It is a forbidden, forbidden, either title of the short story, but a forbidden romance as told with a genre allegory. Like it's all really, and I think that's why it endures, is because this is the thing that's so interesting about the industry now. I have to say, I can point to so many examples of genre bendy movies in the last 5 years that have been successes, and yet the creatives or the people at the top who are greenlighting things are so wary of genre blending. And I'm just like, I don't know how to prove to you all over and over and over again that audiences not only can understand, but they respond to the genre blending. I don't know how to have that conversation with creatives with executives anymore.
It has been that way since I've been in the business. It's always been like nobody wants to blend the genres. But then when they do pop out and do well, they don't ignite that fire of like, let's do more of these things.
It's the anomaly, but it's not. It's like not, every single, yeah. Well, speaking of, so Anthony, have you seen anything? Like I've been watching a lot of movies lately because I have no social life. And, have you been watching anything? Like, did you see any movies that your Oscars are coming up this Sunday? Like, what has impressed you or interested you?
Everything. I mean, See, this.
I know. Whenever I ask the question,
I don't like questions like this because I'm like, I consume so much content. I feel like.
So I see chat talking about blended genres. The Mirror Domains did not like The Monkey. Which I did like The Monkey.
Well, because how funny is The Monkey?
See, I think it's really funny, but it's also very pitch black humor, and it's very, You have to have the right audience. I was there at the premiere, so it was like, and I'm not saying that it was at the premiere. I just mean like half of the audience was Atomic Monster,
Okay.
Blumhouse,
Yeah.
so
It's a
Neon.
different
So it's like,
vibe.
yeah, they were all loving it. But Hard Eyes, which, we just had Michael
Yeah.
Kennedy on the show, that is a slasher rom-com, and that's a successful blend of genres. And Sam points out Companion, which I know you guys said y'all said you were about to watch, but yeah, I think that it happens all the time successfully. I don't understand why they don't get it, but
Yes. And Hard Eyes definitely laid into that hard, right? And it was clever for doing that.
absolutely. But yeah, what have you watched? Are you pulling up your Letterboxd?
I'm pulling up my Fandango account.
Good.
And I'm gonna, because we really do. I'm
trying to watch a lot more too.
What I did just watch was the Sons of Sam documentary
on Netflix.
That was crazy good.
I thought it was great. It was,
and I really liked the Zodiac documentary too.
I couldn't get into that one.
Couldn't get into it?
No, and I think it's because maybe I knew the information already. Like, I loved Fincher's Zodiac, and so like they sold me on Arthur.
Yeah, right. I know. I mean, it was interesting, and I think that's I felt the same way. It's like, but to see that other side of the story,
yeah,
from the family and stuff, I was like, whoa, that's
did you see
who Jack the Ripper was? Did you see that? I felt
no,
like
there's a new Jack the Ripper one.
No, they figured out who Jack the Ripper was.
They were talking about it on last podcast on the left the other day.
Yeah.
Yes. And but nobody's, maybe are they not breaking this? It is not like breaking news because they can't like conclusively.
I mean, maybe right. They don't want to sully this guy.
The mystery is good for business, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, we found like, don't ruin it. We can never know who.
All of our museums, all of our ghost tours, all of our this commerce.
Let's see. I saw Flight Risk. I saw Wolfman. I saw One of Them Days. One of Them Days was fucking hilarious.
It was really fun.
Den of Thieves 2. I saw Captain America. I saw The Last Showgirl, which I really enjoyed. The Last Showgirl.
I couldn't get into that one either.
Wow.
Why do I hate women? Why am I so Rufus
couldn't get into it. Hi, Rufus. I will say The Last Showgirl, did you see it in the theater or just at home?
At home.
Yeah, see in the theater, you're there, you can't walk away. But
captive audience.
Yeah, the beginning of that movie, I was having a hard time watching it because it was so out of focus on the the first 15 minutes of that film. They were shooting in some kind of spherical lens that really softens the edges, but then the center was very soft. On the big screen, it was like really hard and
interesting
to watch. But then it went away, so I think it may have just been a couple days something happened. Because it settled, it stopped.
You know what I surprisingly loved, and we've already kind of touched on it, is The Brutalist. I did not think I was gonna like that movie, and I loved that movie.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the accolades.
Absolutely, and I did watch it at home, so I was able to get up during the intermission and not feel like I don't like sitting in the theater for all that time. I think this was a good choice for me to watch it at home. But that said, I have a funny story to tell you.
Yeah.
So I was at dinner for chat. If you don't know, I smoke. There's a cigar that I like to smoke, which I know sounds very silly because I am a lady who's like smoking cigars, really. But there's one kind that I like, and my dad and my mom every now and again, but my dad and I will smoke them. So there's this group of boys that I am friends with out here who my friend Josh Miller, he's a screenwriter.
Yeah.
He hosts cigar nights. So I've been going over, I'm the only girl, obviously, and they're so sweet. They were all like, Clarke, do you know anyone else that you want to invite? Like any, and I was like, no, I don't know any women in Los Angeles that smoke cigars, but thank you for being inclusive. And I tried it. I'm not uncomfortable here. Anyway, so we're all out at dinner. There's 4 of us, including me, and the Brutalist comes up. Now, I have made it past the intermission. And but I've got like 45, 50 minutes left. And so I pressed, I didn't finish it because I was like, it's late, whatever. So I'm talking to these guys, and they say they're like, they want to talk about the Brutalist, and then they go, oh, has everybody seen it? And I'm like, it's fine. Like in my head, I'm like, I don't say anything. And I'm not going to say what it is, but if you've seen the movie, there is a sequence with Adrian Brody's character and another character, and I hadn't gotten there yet.
You should have spoke up.
Well, but here's the thing. I later revealed, I was like, oh, okay, actually, I haven't gotten that far yet. And they were like, what? Oh, no, we're so sorry. And I was like, no. I said that you could proceed because I tell you what, if you gave me 5 guesses about what was about to happen, there is no way that that was going to be in my top 5 guesses. And so, but we just laughed. So, and then sure enough, so I went back and I pressed play from where I left off. Literally 6 minutes later, it was I was just right around the corner.
Like, oh, so close. So close. Well, was any of it ruined for you? I mean, did you still enjoy it?
Oh, I mean, I Guy Pearce, you know, I really like Kieran Culkin a lot. And I think the performance in A Real Pain is very good.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I think it's very good. And I think it's a real indie, and I think it's heartfelt, and it's family, and you'll know exactly what the movie is when you see it. But that said, I just find it shocking that in this year's Oscar race, where we're seeing, is it going to be Mikey Madsen, or is it going to be Demi, right? Back and forth and back and forth, or what's going to win Best Picture, back and forth. Or I find it shocking that this Best Supporting Actor race is not more fluid, because Guy Pearce, first of all, I think this performance is excellent. But also, for a body of work, Guy Pearce has been consistently a fabulous actor his entire career. And so I just don't know how we're just not having, he's just not, I mean, he's nominated, but like, what is going on?
I think Guy Pearce burned the wrong bridges. Yeah. I think that's probably why it's not happening.
That's entirely possible. And then wait, there's another really great performance for supporting that I feel like isn't getting. Anyway, I just don't feel like supporting should be as locked up as it is, I guess.
Yeah. It's a weird Oscars this year.
It really is. Where do you stand on Best Picture?
Who was nominated? What are the nominees?
Well, there are 10.
I don't have them memorized.
No, I know, but like basically meaning like, it seems to be a toss-up at this point between Anora and The Brutalist. I'm Team Brutalist. I think Anora could have been edited a little bit more, but I very much liked it.
I'm with you for sure. I would be on that team too. I just want to see what else is in the.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't it be like right at the top? I must have passed it.
So it's Wicked, it's The Brutalist, it's The Substance, it's A Complete Unknown, it's Emilia Perez, it's The Brutalist, it's what were we just talking about?
Anora.
Anora. How am I 6 short? Or 3 short. And then is
Best Picture. Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave.
Yes.
I didn't watch Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, I'm Still Here. Nickel Boys. The Substance, and Wicked. It's a weird one. I'd say it's The Brutalist.
I'll tell you, I enjoyed Conclave, and I did not think I would.
Did you watch everything here? Did you see it all?
I have not seen I'm Still Here.
I haven't seen that either. And I have not seen Conclave. Conclave was good.
I really liked it.
Okay, good. Because when I watched the trailer, I was like,
bunch of dudes talking.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to see that movie.
It's I would love actually to know what you think about it from a directing perspective, because that was something where I was shocked at how visually compelling I found the movie for a movie about a bunch of people in a room talking, right?
Okay, good.
And gorgeous costumes. This is the thing, is he uses so much, and he was not nominated, and he wasn't, John Chu wasn't, and Denis Villeneuve wasn't, and those three were just like, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
The way I always like to say it is like, if good or great pop art were easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the problem with like John Chu and with Denis, is like they just make it look easy. It is not easy, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, Conclave, visually, the colors, the costumes, really, I don't want to overhype it, because it is a chamber piece in a way, but like, I want to know what you think of it, if and when.
I'll watch it. But that's the thing. If you can make a chamber piece really visually interesting, then you're doing a lot, right? Doing a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah. Did you guys watch Wicked?
I liked Wicked.
I did too.
I mean, I had never seen the play. I honestly didn't really know much about it. Like Natalie had, she'd seen it on Broadway, or when it was at the Pantages, I think she saw it. And I was like, oh, I like this. It's good. It's cool. Now, she told me I may not like the second half of it.
Okay. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Because we've talked, Chat and I have talked about this a lot. I am so curious about part 2. Because I just went and saw it again at the Pantages. It came through, and I have read the book, and I have, know the music very well, and have seen the show multiple times. But I had kind of forgotten about what Act 2, right, is.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I actually love Act 2, because that's where the dark stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's where she's the Wicked Witch of the West, and we get into like, the stuff. But what I think fans, or like the common critique, is that Act 2 is like, it doesn't end on a defying gravity moment. And sure, it's less fleshed out, because Act 1 on stage is not 2.5 hours long like the movie is, but it is longer, right? It is longer and more kind of fleshed out. So there's a real opportunity here for Act 2, as the movie does it, to really flesh out these scenes, these relationships, because the shit goes down in Act 2. And so I'm actually very optimistic that they're gonna knock it out.
I'm glad that because I looked, like, I mean, Natalie told me, and then I looked it up, because I think maybe I would have had a hard time with it, not knowing that they alter the Wizard of Oz, and I didn't know that going in. I thought Wicked was a prequel to the Wizard of Oz.
Sure,
because that's in all this time.
It's kind of how they say it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is the story of the Wicked Witch of the West, but it's not. It's a retelling of the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
I'm glad I know that, because now I can be like, okay, well, fuck the Wizard of Oz. All right, this is just a retelling of the Wizard of Oz. It incorporates that story. Because I was like, oh, Dorothy's in this? I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know Dorothy shows up and all that stuff. I'm glad it's going to... When you read the second act on paper, you're like, that's a lot of shit that's got to go down. So it's actually good that they have probably another 2.5 hours.
Yes. And I think they are so in love with their cast. So like I see here, Mirror Domain says, is part 2 already in the can? And it is.
Mm.
And so I think that John and the team are writing for these actors who they adore and are taking some liberties. Like I know that the screenwriter, the co-screenwriter, she wrote the book of, she did not Gregory Maguire, she wrote the book of the musical. And so
Okay.
she even said, we put some things in part in the movie that we wanted to put in the show, but we did not have room to put in the show.
Yeah,
And so
that's
I think
good.
they've been ruminating on this for literally years. And
Yeah.
John, too, I think is so in love with his cast that they are willing to, like, they're like, let's give them this big, meaty stuff. My question has always been, like, part one is a PG affair, and that's
Mhm.
totally fine. But you know, Wicked is the musical is a PG-13 affair, and Elphaba is angry and scary in the
Yeah.
show. And
Okay.
so far, Cynthia is not quite borderline. Like, she's of course frustrated and she is being, you know, dismissed and disrespected, but like that's the the perform. She hasn't quite gotten angry yet.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I am so curious if part two is going to get a PG-13 rating. I feel like it should,
It probably will. It probably will. Right.
but
They're
I
not
don't
going to lose
know.
their. They won't lose their. But so the first one was PG. It was straight PG.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, they won't lose any audience if they give it the PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
It
I
may.
mean,
I don't think they'd turn it down. I think if they shot a movie that was a PG-13, I don't think they'd be like, "Oh shit, we gotta cut this down."
yeah. I don't know. I don't, because, you know, there were a couple of choices that John made where they felt totally authentic to his vision of what the story is, but they
Mhm.
were a little soft
Okay.
in my opinion. You know, act two, though, like that's the thing. You know, you get little glimpses in act one on the stage of Elphaba being the Wicked Witch of the West, you know,
Yeah.
that Margaret Hamilton iconography. A
Yeah.
lot of people's first scare in their cinematic history is the
Yeah.
Wicked Witch of the
Wicked
West.
Witch. Yeah.
And Elphaba is not scary in part one of Wicked.
No.
So
No.
that's sort of where my question lies. But I think we're gonna get a trailer at the Oscars.
We're gonna get a trailer.
I think we are. I think we are.
Well, you
Anyway,
really took me on a ride there. We're in Wicked Land, and
thank you for indulging me and talking about Wicked with me. I have a feeling that you have not talked about Wicked with anyone else on a podcast before. Am
I
I
have
right?
not. I have not. And I will say again, I actually really liked the movie, and I like musicals.
Okay.
I just do. I got nothing wrong with it. I've always liked musicals. I I don't like people that don't like musicals. I think that they don't get what a musical is. Anyone who doesn't like a musical is taking life too literally, you know, because there's no better combination than film and music when it's done correctly. I love one of my favorite films is Scrooge, the musical Scrooge with Albert Finney.
Okay.
And also not, but in the horror genre, I love Phantom of the Paradise, which is borderline a musical. But
it's definitely a musical.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never seen Scrooge, it's an excellent adaptation. And when you have good and Wicked, obviously it's super famous, right? They have good music. So, but for me, I don't, I know, Defying Gravity and things like, of course, I've heard these songs,
Sure.
the top songs, but when you watch the whole movie, you're like, oh yeah, this is all good music. Back in the heyday of Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, it's like those animated films had, or Frozen, right? More recently, like those animated films have good music. If you don't have that music, it's why the sequel to Phantom of the Opera didn't go anywhere, because it wasn't the Phantom of the Opera, right?
Right.
That music, the sequel musical, just didn't have the songs.
I don't disagree. Oh, get right out of town.
Get right out of town.
One of my faves. So I've kept you very long time, but chat does have one last question for you on this topic.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is about Joker 2. Have you seen Joker 2? Did that work for you as a musical?
I did not like Joker 2.
Fair. I haven't seen it yet.
Don't lie to me, Clarke.
I did not.
You really haven't seen it?
No. I really did not like Joker 1.
Well, then you'll probably love Joker 2.
Will
See, I think Joker 1 is like a cinematic masterpiece. I love Joker 1.
We're not the same person anymore.
I mean, I love that movie. I think Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that movie is just out of this world. But I mean, granted, I'm a big Batman Joker fan.
I don't care about superheroes. It's not for me. It's a joke.
It's a joke. I believed you for a second.
Now, I'm a professional nerd, so yes.
Well, why didn't you like Joker?
Oh,
so you're like all kinds of reasons.
How long do we have? No,
30 seconds or less.
Yeah. I fundamentally disagree with people like Arthur Fleck. I have no tolerance for people like him.
Or for mentally ill people?
No. People who do not take their mental illness seriously. There's a Marcus Parks always says, he's a co-host of Last Podcast on the Left, and he is bipolar, and he speaks very openly about mental illness. And he says something that I just love, which is, your mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
And
but,
so
it's the 70s, though. I mean, you have to ground it in the era.
He just had so many chances. He had so many chances.
Well, you knew where it was going. It's the Joker.
I just think he should have chosen differently. No, I don't like that character. Not the Joker. I don't like Arthur Fleck. I don't like it. I don't like him.
In all honesty.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is that if you did not like the first movie, you will probably really like the second movie. And that seems to be almost across the board why people did not like it, is because they enjoyed the first movie. And it turns the entire thing on its head and makes Arthur the opposite of what he was in the first film.
Oh, proactive and healthy and someone I can root for?
I mean, yeah, kind of. I mean, it all takes place in the asylum.
There's no way. Okay, my homework is going to be to watch Joker Part 2, and your homework was to watch Conclave.
Yes, deal.
And then we'll do this again. Yes, and then we will do this again. Because what a double feature. What a double feature. Conclave and Joker 2. What a time. Well, Anthony, I could keep talking, but I feel like I need to be respectful of your time. So
I got stuff to do, lady.
You do. You are very busy. You are very busy. And but also Sam says
this time. Yeah, what's Sam's? Oh boy.
Sam says you're gonna hate Joker 2.
Don't ruin it. I got her convinced to watch it.
Oh, I'm going to watch it. I just got my HBO subscription reactivated. And so I've thought about it in the last last week. I've been like, should I do this? And then I'm like, no. But to have the compare and contrast, we will meet again. And you have to report back about Conclave, and I will do the same.
I'm looking forward to Conclave.
Anthony, this has been so fun, as always. I need you and Natalie to move back to Los Angeles so that I can see you guys more often, please.
Just we'll be there tomorrow if you need us.
No, tomorrow. That's right. Lastly, before as I'm letting you go, do you want people to follow you on social media? Do you have anything coming up that they should? I tell them all the time to watch Malum on HBO, or excuse me, on AMC Plus and Shudder, but you tell the people.
I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's the only thing I really am on. Instagram, Anthony DiBlasi, right? You'll find me. Mm-hmm. Clarke will link me to something. But just been writing a bunch. Malum is still, just dropped on Shudder not that long ago, so we're getting all new life out of it. So that's good. Check it out on Shudder if you haven't seen it yet.
You heard
Everybody's
it
got
from
Shudder
Anthony.
now.
Yeah, they do. They better.
I might
yes,
have something coming down the pike too. Maybe.
Ooh.
Are you still acting, or are you just directing now? Did you give up? Did you give up on
I'm
the
open to meetings.
open to meetings? Okay,
I'm taking
we'll talk.
No, for you, Anthony, anything. Yes, of course. No. But no, this was great. I cannot wait. I can't wait to do something with you again for realsies though.
Me too.
It was really fun. Always fun. All right, y'all. Anthony, thank you again for being here. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna remove you from the stage.
Okay.
You are welcome to exit if you would like.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye, Anthony.
All right, talk soon. Bye.
All right, everyone. That was Anthony DiBlasi, one of my faves. Thank you so much to Anthony for being here, and thank you to everybody in chat for all of your wonderful questions. Thank you to everybody in Instagram, Patreon, Discord, all the places you could ask questions. I really appreciate them, and thank you for being so active in the chat. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And we went on a journey. We really did. But Anthony is the best. So, all right, y'all. What's next? What do I have for you? Okay. If you are a member of Patreon and you are $10 and higher, we have picked our date for our February watch along, and movie selections are in the Patreon. So go ahead and vote. If you are $5 and higher, please join the Discord. Would love to have you there. And if you are not a member of Patreon, you can join for free if you want to. I'll be back on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific for our weekly live stream where we're going to be doing questions. Oh, yeah, or stories. That reminds me. So if you have a story, an entertainment related story, industry related story that you want covered, throw it in the Patreon, throw it in the Discord, send it my way. And yes, another Mr. Lizard. I mean, I'm going to be thinking about that Sondheim Barker project like forever. What are we doing? Why has that not happened? I digress. All right, y'all. Thanks again for being here. Thank you for everything. And I will see you again on Thursday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.